Hello, pattern readers, and welcome to part 9 of the Great Hunt reread. We have the return of Thom Merrilin, we have Aiel, we have Prophecies, and we have stuff blowing up. So let's get to it. Chapter 25, Cairhien. Rand and his party arrive in Cairhien and make their way through the raucous foregate. They have to stop at the city gate and give their names and titles before entering, and they're instructed to return the next day with the name of their inn. Rand puts his foot in his mouth by inquiring about staying in the foregate, and he asks for information on Selene before heading into the city with Huron and Loyal. They stay at an inn called Defender of the Dragon Wall, and Rand again blunders by asking for only one room. They end up with one room for him and an adjoining for Huron and Loyal. Rand decides to head back to the foregate for a while, and the others decline to join him. But before he can leave, the innkeeper approaches him to give him invitations from 3 noble houses. Rand declares openly, "I am not playing Dias Daymar," and he hurls the invitations in the fire. Huron warns him this will only make people think he is deep in the game. Rand leaves angrily and heads to the foregate, passing many performers at open-air theaters. The voice of one of the performers draws him in like a rope. It is Thom Merrilin. They meet eyes, and Thom nods backstage. Rand meets him, noticing his limp, while Thom comments on Rand's fine coat. Thom surmises that since Moiraine is not with Rand, she must have been after Mat or Perrin. Rand has so much that he wants to tell Thom, but Thom tells him to meet him at his inn in an hour and to bring his harp and flute. Chapter 26, Discord. Rand, back at his inn, is jubilant over meeting Thom and grabs his instruments. He convinces Loyal to go with him to meet Thom, while Huron stays to watch the horn and dagger. At Thom's inn, they are directed to his room, and a woman named Dina tells them to come in, calling it her room as well. She is slightly older than Rand and is practicing her juggling in hopes that Thom will say she is ready to perform soon. She plans to become the first woman gleeman. When Thom returns, she gives him a passionate kiss, embarrassing Rand. Thom asks her to leave them, and when she's gone, he praises her skill, saying she will be a court bard. Thom examines his instruments, but Rand quickly segues to the hunt for the horn, telling Thom they have the actual horn. Thom does not believe this until he hears that Moiraine believed it. Rand also tells Thom that Trollocs and Dark Friends are after them, and he asks for Thom's help. Rand asks Loyal to leave them alone, and then he asks Thom about the Cairhien cycle. Thom gives him a few verses, but he wants to know why Rand is asking if no Aes Sedai are after him. Rand wonders if they mention the horn. Thom doesn't answer this, but he says he thought Moiraine wanted Rand because he could channel, and he tells the story of his nephew who was gentled and died. Rand tries to convince Thom and tempt him with the horn, but Thom says that Dina loves him and he her, and he will not be caught up in it. He gives Rand his flute and asks for a clean break. When Thom is alone, his old friend Zara comes to the door and accuses him of playing the great game again since he's mixed up with an outland lord. Thom denies it and tells her that Rand is a shepherd, but she clearly does not believe it. Thom prepares for his performance, telling himself that he and Rand are out of it. Chapter 27, The Shadow in the Night. Rand and Loyal walk through the nearly empty foregate, and while Rand wonders if he should keep waiting for Ingtar, they realize that what had looked like 5 men holding a Trolloc puppet was an actual Trolloc that attacks them. Rand kills it, and the 5 dark friends run away. Then an unseen Trolloc grabs Rand by the throat. Loyal grabs the Trolloc and Rand is shaken free. While Loyal struggles with it, Rand tries to embrace Saidin and fails, the taint making him sick. Loyal manages to kill the Trolloc, and he's obviously unsettled by this. In the distance, they see another group with a Trolloc puppet. They try to make their way another direction, and every turning they find another Trolloc blocking the way they need to go. Finally, when they're near the Illuminators' chapter house, Rand thinks of going and asking for help. Selene shows up. Rand tells her to run from the Trollocs, and she seems unconcerned, even chiding Rand for letting himself be herded by them. Rand plans to make it into the chapter house, even if he has to climb a wall, but Selene points out a door. Once inside, Loyal warns Rand that Illuminators have a reputation for killing intruders to protect their secrets. They overhear two Illuminators, Aludra and Tammuz, and they try to hide, but Loyal keeps bumping into racks of fireworks, and Selene is making no effort to be stealthy. When Loyal knocks over a rack that had smoldering sticks, one firework is set off. Rand and the others are able to hide behind a wall, and Aludra blames Tammuz. They spot 3 Trollocs. Rand tells Loyal to get Selene to safety, and he will deal with the Trollocs. He decides to use a firework against them, and he ends up setting a huge fire and blasting a hole in a building. He makes his way out and back to Loyal, but Selene is gone again. Rand regrets not being able to find her and help her. But back at their inn, they find Huron and a note from Selene, reminding Rand to think of the glory and of her, for you are always mine. Rand wonders if all women are crazy. Chapter 28. A new thread in the pattern. Perrin watches the mountains of Kinslayer's Dagger as they ride, for the wolves have told him there are people in the mountains. Mat seems paler, and Varen seems worried about him. Ingtar joins Perrin to ask him again for the information the wolves gave him. The wolves know that someone or something they call Shadow Killer attacked the Dark Friends and took the horn, and the Trollocs are now following Shadow Killer. Uno joins to tell them he has spotted an Aielman. The man steps into their path, and several Shinarans, including Massima, move to attack before Ingtar orders them to stop. The Aielman introduces himself as Urien, and Ingtar says they do not wish to fight. Urien greets Varen as a wise one, saying she has the look that wise ones do of being younger than her years. Ingtar asks for any signs of the Trollocs or Dark Friends they are hunting. Urien has not seen them, but he does call it a sign from their prophecies, saying that Trollocs leaving the Blight means that Aiel will leave the Waste, which they call the Threefold Land. Varen names herself an Aes Sedai and wants answers from Urien about Rhuidean, but he can only tell her that it is where men and women go to become clan chiefs or wise ones, and nothing more. He wonders if she will slay him for failing Aes Sedai again, saying this is also from their prophecies, but she only wants answers to what he is searching for. Someone called He Who Comes with the Dawn. He will be from the wetlands, but of Aiel blood, and he will go to Rhuidean and lead the Aiel out of the Threefold Land. Varen gives him no information, and he waits only for her nod to depart. Ingtar plans to ride hard to make up time. Mat whispers to Perrin. Does he think that Urien was looking for Rand? Perrin says he doesn't know, but he shivers when he overhears Varen wondering aloud if the Dark One touches the pattern.
The remainder of this video contains spoilers for the entire Wheel of Time series. If you do not want to be massively spoiled, stop here or proceed at your own risk.
Thom is interested in Rand's first mention of Moiraine. Moiraine said I was alive, did she? Is she with you then? And he seems disappointed. Too bad in a way. She's a fine woman, even if she is. These are hints of the romance to come with Thom and Moiraine, however subtle. Also noteworthy is that Thom doesn't believe Rand really has the horn until he hears that Moiraine believed it. Thom trusts Moiraine's judgment, at least. Let's talk prophecy, since Thom gives Rand some lines from the Prophecies of the Dragon. Twice and twice shall he be marked, twice to live and twice to die. Once the heron to set his path, twice the heron to name him true. Once the dragon for remembrance lost, twice the dragon for the price he must pay. This one is pretty well understood. Twice to live and twice to die seems to refer to his rebirth of a sort in Moradin's body. He already has his first heron, gained when facing Ishamael earlier in this book, and his path does seem to be set. He'll gain the second heron at the end of the book, fighting Ishamael again. And by then, people will begin to see him as the dragon reborn and believe it to be true. The dragons will come when he goes to Rhuidean, which is mentioned for the first time in these chapters. For Remembrance Lost, Rand learns Aiel history, and in exposing it, breaks them. The price he must pay is vague enough, but since this seems to be connected to the Aiel, I would say that perhaps it refers to the loss of so many Aiel in order for him to save the ones he can. The next verse must have been parsed a million different ways, but it ended up being fairly simple. Twice dawns the day when his blood is shed, once for mourning, once for birth. Red on black, the dragon's blood stains the rock of Shaiel Ghul. In the pit of doom shall his blood free men from the shadow. Twice dawns the day refers to an eclipse during the last battle. Once for mourning and once for birth, again seems to refer to Rand's death and rebirth in Moradin's body. Blood on the rocks comes from his unhealing wound in his side, and Rand is successful in defeating the Dark One and resealing the prison. Rand seems to be giving Thom some new information when he tells him that the horn could be used by either side. Whoever blows it, the heroes will come to fight for them, dark friend or not. We are told this information with confidence and from a source that seems to be reliable, and so we believe it, just the way Thom does, even though it turns out not to be true. Selene continues to trigger all the super obvious alarm bells. She shows up out of nowhere, doesn't seem alarmed by Trollocs, doesn't try to hide, just keeps going after Rand to be great and to use the void. And she says things like, "If you will not take greatness when it is in your grasp, perhaps you deserve to die." She even seems sort of impressed by Rand burning down the chapter house, or at least like pleasantly enjoying being surprised by him. Even though she calls him dangerous, she also says, "You are always mine." We also get lots of tantalizing hints about the Aiel. There's Aes Sedai agelessness looking something like Wise One's slowing, as a hint that Wise Ones can channel. Varen certainly picks up on this. And it's interesting because agelessness, we know, looks a little bit different, and not all Wise Ones can channel. So it's definitely a hint put in there specifically as a clue about Wise Ones channeling. Roydian is definitely something we should care about because A, Varen wants to know about it, and B, Urian doesn't really know that much about it and can't really say anything about it. Then we have a hint about Aiel failing the Aes Sedai before, and the Gen Aiel, which we can't say anything about except their name. And then, of course, he who comes with the dawn is pretty obviously Rand. And this is all set up for a lot of reveals with the Aiel, mostly in Book 4. Finally, I like the Aes Sedai answer that Varen gives to Urian. She obviously knows he's looking for Rand, but she says, "I cannot tell you where he is, Urian." True. "And I have heard of no signs or portents to guide you to him." She probably could tell him something that would guide him to him, but that's some very careful sentence structure there. First, some things I just enjoy about Rand in these chapters. I like that he's not really thinking about what it means to be a lord in terms of propriety. I do like that he's thinking about it in terms of what his responsibility is to others, but he takes one look at Cairhien proper and one look at the Foregate and decides that the Foregate looks way more fun. That's the way to live, really. I also enjoyed that he was just so excited to see Thom, genuinely thrilled. And I think it was more than just Thom being a potential source of help. He does ask Thom for help directly and straight away. But when Thom refuses, he doesn't try to press him. He just goes on trying to figure out what he can do without help, even though he's in a really tight spot. I also continue to enjoy that he really isn't letting himself be influenced by Selene, despite the manifest pressure and enticement that she's laying before him. One kind of ridiculous thing about their interactions is the way Rand just keeps wanting to protect her while she just willfully exposes herself. Now, she isn't really in danger, and it's very much in keeping with Rand's protect women shtick, but it is kind of eye-rolling for me. That said, to be fair, in this case, he doesn't really persist, and Loyal is able to convince him that it's time to go. Another thing I have to discuss is the way that Rand's instincts continue to get him in deep with Dias Damar, despite his best efforts. He's just so transparent and blunt, and of course there's his Ta'veren nature at work as well. And he just gets in as deep as possible by burning these invitations and making a show of it. Even Huron can tell him that was the wrong thing to do. And it makes for an interesting comparison to Thom. Rand isn't cut out for Dias Damar at all, and Thom is so good at it, and yet both of them seem to get accidentally involved this time. Thom wants to stay out of it and believes he can, but he also admits to himself, all it takes is to start thinking about the great game, and I start playing it. Part of that is Rand's influence, and it's not his fault, but Thom has his own instincts to play the game without really trying that get him in deeper. So despite their contrast in this area, both Rand and Thom get pulled in deeper despite their efforts to stay out of it. Speaking of Thom, I wanted to comment on his attitude towards Dina. He says he loves her, and he seems to mean it. But he also hasn't learned to respect the wishes that she has for herself. Loyal, of all people, points this out. When Thom is going on about how talented she is and saying she will be a court bard, Loyal points out that she wants to be a gleeman. But Thom dismisses this. And he also dismisses the idea of marrying her, saying he would be a burden to her, even though that might well be what Dina wants. It points to a lesson that Thom needs to learn, to respect the wishes of the one he loves rather than projecting what he thinks is best for her. And it's also a good reason why an unbalanced relationship like this probably isn't a good idea for Thom. The pattern is really at work in these chapters, delivering things to Rand that he needs and setting up things that he will need, some of them way in advance. First, he basically gets Thom dropped in his lap. And even though Thom refuses to help him directly here, he'll still end up being shaken loose from his cozy hideaway and taking actions that will have a huge impact for Rand down the line. All of that's in the next few chapters, but it's set up here. The Aiel, of course, are on the move and looking for Rand, and we learn that they have their own name for him, he who comes with the dawn. We haven't learned the word Cairhien yet. And they have their own prophecies. This is an entire people prepared to uproot their existence to follow Rand. I also like the parallel with the wolves having their own name for him, Shadow Killer, and the way the wolves seem to be in awe of him as far as Perrin can tell. But my favorite example of Ta'Veren pull in these chapters is the Illuminator chapter house. Rand is just trying to set off one firework, and he ends up destroying the entire thing, shaking the very guild to its core, which sets Eludra free, so that she's eventually, many books later, available and finally willing to help Mat with his scheme of making weapons that will give Mat and Rand a crucial edge in the last battle. So it's a seemingly minor choice that ends up having a major world-shaking ripple effect. There's always some humor and lightness wherever Loyal is concerned. And in this case, it's him being cheated at dice by Dina, who's trying to teach him a lesson. And he so innocently figures it out, but still isn't sure. And yes, I laughed at Rand wondering if all women are crazy after reading Celine's second letter. Normally, I'm not here for those kinds of generalizations, but in this case, when you have Lanfear as an example, I'll allow it.
Next up will be chapters 29 through 31. As always, leave me a comment and let me know your favorite parts from these chapters and anything I might have missed, and I'll see you next time.